Chapter 286, What Makes a Jutsu Rank A? For 1 hour straight, Fujin continuously trained the assassin's rush jutsu. His breathing became heavy as he thought, damn, it's been such a long time since my chakra reserves hit so low. Rank A jutsus are very taxing on chakra. But, it isn't as bad as I thought it'd be. A thoughtful expression appeared on Fujin's face as he thought, I used to think that the more destructive or complicated a jutsu is, the higher ranked it'd be. However, now that doesn't seem to be the case. After all, in terms of pure destructiveness, none of the rank A jutsus I read is anywhere near as destructive as Infinite Breakthrough Jutsu. Instead, it seems like the jutsu is ranked depending on how efficiently it can utilize the yin and yang aspects of the chakra. Though I learned this jutsu just an hour ago, I have tried it dozens of times. And I don't see any way to optimize it further like I could optimize my rank C and B jutsus. The reason for this is that this jutsu is already optimized to limit. It's the same for Wind Explosion Clone Jutsu. The ratios of the yin and yang chakra were optimized to be what is the most effective. So looking at it from another perspective, when I optimized my jutsus using yin and yang chakra earlier, I was actually increasing their ranks. Or at least bringing them closer to rank A. This is why I directly managed to learn Blade of Wind Jutsu. After all, I had already modified Wind Sword Jutsu enough to replicate the same results as the Blade of Wind Jutsu. I guess the experienced ninjas like Hiruzen and Orochimaru have already completed this process for all or most of their jutsus. It's probably why they don't use a lot of higher ranked jutsus, as their rank B and C jutsus are basically as strong as a rank A jutsu. I guess Renjiro was implying this back then. I thought he was just referring to supercharging jutsus. Fujin concluded, in essence, a rank A jutsu is a pinnacle jutsu that can't be improved any further. As for the S rank jutsus, they probably can't be explained with this logic. They should be jutsus that either surpasses these limits like Raisin Shuriken, or jutsus that are beyond logic like the Dead Demon Consuming Seal. Fujin began walking out of the training ground thinking, anyways, I'm on the right track. No point in thinking about S-rank jutsus for now. Time to meditate until I recover my chakra. A mischievous smile appeared on Fujin's face. His chakra signature transformed as he changed into his Umbu attire with a different mask. He entered Umbu's training in one of the wind training rooms. Within the next 6 hours, he absorbed all energy from the wind crystals in 3 wind training rooms. He left as quietly as he arrived while thinking, looks like maintaining disguise anymore wouldn't be possible. There is no way Hiruzen won't know that it is me. Still, this is fun. I'll keep up the disguise for old time's sake, ha ha ha. He left the Umbu headquarters and continued training the assassin's rush jutsu. In the next hour, his chakra ran out once again. However, he had reduced the number of hand seals required to use the jutsu to just 1. Satisfied with his progress, he went out for dinner. Around the same time, an Umbu ninja appeared in Hiruzen's office and reported, Lord Hokage, the energy in wind crystals in 3 wind training rooms suddenly disappeared. As per my estimates, 2 of them should have had around 40% energy while the last one should have had around 75% energy left. Hiruzen's expression immediately went dark. He cursed in his heart, that brat. I knew it. There's no one else as greedy as him. He didn't even wait for 2 days after returning. Hiruzen looked at the Umbu and instructed, it's fine. You don't need to monitor wind training rooms anymore. The Umbu ninja was puzzled. He wondered, why did you make me monitor it for over a year then? And why did the problem suddenly start? And why is your expression so dark? Seeing how dark Hiruzen's face was, the Umbu ninja didn't dare ask any questions and left obediently. Hiruzen angrily thought, how many hundreds of millions of ryo worth of wind crystals did this brat eat? However, he soon sighed helplessly as he analyzed, but if his speed of absorbing the energy is so high, it means that his talent in wind manipulation has increased even more, which is good for the village. If he can reach S rank, then this is a small cost to pay. I'll turn a blind eye to it. Besides, it's not like I can ask him to stop anyways. Even if I make him admit, I can't do anything to him. And knowing his greedy nature, he'll likely spend months in those rooms until Konoha runs out of wind crystals. For the next couple of days, Fujin repeated the same activities. He made rapid improvements while making Hiruzen's heart ache due to how rapidly he was going through the wind crystals. Finally, on the fourth day, Fujin stood in the training ground. A large amount of chakra appeared on his back. The chakra began converting into wind and blasted backwards with huge force. Fujin was instantly propelled towards the trees. He quickly changed direction without slowing down and navigated through the densely packed trees for a couple of minutes. As he moved, chakra gathered on his right fist. He jumped upwards before changing his direction downwards. The winds propelled him rapidly towards the ground as Fujin punched the ground. Immediately, a loud sound could be heard. A crater with 15 feet radius and 3 feet depth was formed on the ground. At the same time, multiple cracks spread through the ground for dozens of meters. Fujin jumped back on his feet with a grin on his face. He shook his palm as he muttered, "Speed is power." This jutsu amplifies the power of the Senju Taijutsu style even more. However, it hurts like hell. I'll need to mix Iron Skin Jutsu into this as well later on. For now. Fujin rapidly weaved hand seals and slammed his hand on the cracked ground. Wind Release, Geyser Creation Jutsu. Immediately, the air began moving rapidly in the crater and through the cracks in the ground. In a second, sharp winds rushed out of the cracks. At the same time, the sharp winds inside the cracks began widening them. Fujin stopped the jutsu and analyzed. I initially thought that this jutsu would only be useful to kill enemies hiding underground. In the Fourth Great Ninja War, this technique could be used to kill Zetas by thousands if I catch a large number of them underground. But, on second thought, this can be an excellent continuation while using the Senju Taijutsu style. After all, no one would want to take a hit from a chakra-enhanced punch head-on. If I use the chance to punch the ground and release this jutsu, the enemy will be caught completely off guard. It will be a good tactic. But I'll have to learn how to use this jutsu without hand signs as well. Fujin let out a sigh as he thought, I was planning to move on to Fuin Jutsu today. Leave it, I'll master this jutsu first. If I'm assigned new Umbu members under me, I'll have to train them. And the initial missions will likely be police duties in the village. I can use that time to learn the seals as well. Fujin continued training. While he trained, Shikaku was busy reading the numerous reports that he kept receiving. He muttered, First IWA moved 500 ninjas to the border with the land of birds and 750 ninjas to the border with the land of bear. In response, Suna deployed 200 ninjas on each of the borders. And in Kumo, many ninjas are moving around. All this confusion over a simple promotion mission. Shikaku was left speechless. He thought, fortunately Suna and IWA haven't moved into those buffer countries. Otherwise, Kumo will move for sure. And this time we won't be able to fool the world and get the Land of Iron to be in the same camp as us. Still, I believe Onaki just got worried due to how many Suna ninjas moved west and took precautionary measures. The matter should cool down after a few weeks as neither intends to start a war. But, if 3 major villages are moving around and we don't move, others will get suspicious. Kumo might think that we are weak or unprepared for war. Meanwhile, Suna will confirm that we were behind those recent events. Shikaku got up and laid a map on his table as he analyzed the actions Konoha should take to come out of this period unharmed. After running a few calculations, he made up his mind and went to Hiruzen's office. Hiruzen looked at Shikaku and immediately realized why he was there. Shikaku said, "Lord Hokage, in light of recent events, I have come up with a PLA." Hiruzen cut him off and said, "No need to consult me. Just implement what you planned. I have full confidence in your capabilities." Shikaku's expression immediately became dark. Hiruzen knew all about the recent events. However, since Fujin had returned to Konoha, there would be no further hostilities. So the situation would defuse by itself as no one other than Kumo wanted a war. Shikaku obviously realized Hiruzen's thought process. His face was dark because Hiruzen threw all the work on his shoulders. He nodded and left the room. Later that day, 500 ninjas left Konoha and moved towards the border with the Land of Grass. They had strict orders to not enter it. At the same time, smaller squads sneakily left Konoha one by one. In 3 days, around 1,200 ninjas had left Konoha this way. They all met up at the assigned location for Kakashi to take control of this army. They stayed hidden while preparing for war. However, Shikaku arranged for Kakashi to drop hints of their movements. In a few days, all the major villages became aware of a large Konoha force wandering around their borders with the Land of Hot Water. Chapter 287, A Long Game of Shogi. By the time the Konoha ninjas were deployed outside the village, Fujin had managed to perform the geyser creation jutsu without the use of hand signs. Satisfied with his progress, Fujin decided to move his attention to Fuin jutsu. He returned to his basement and created a shadow clone which dispelled itself instantly. The shadow clone that was in the library immediately received the message. He packed the scrolls and placed them back and dispelled himself. Fujin received memories and began analyzing. During the last week, Fujin left one clone in the library to plan out the order in which he should learn the seals. He didn't have clones working actively on the seal as training rankajutsus was very straining on his chakra. He could barely train for an hour straight with all his chakra. A frown formed on Fujin's face as he realized, the 4-symbol seal is too complicated. I won't be able to learn it right now. In fact, most of the top seals are very complicated. I will have to start with the easier seals. It's fine though. I still have a lot of time. Fujin planned for a couple of minutes and decided, using too many clones to learn the seals will be redundant. I'll leave some chakra with me and meditate in the wind training room. As long as none of my clones is dispelled, I won't be disturbed and can meditate in peace. Fujin created a shadow clone with 70% of his max chakra. The clone used multi-shadow clone jutsu to equally divide his chakra into 60 clones. They began practicing the seals while Fujin left his house and moved towards the Umbu training facilities. In a remote location in the desert, a camp was set up. A dozen similar camps were set up in the desert. However, this camp was special as it housed one of the 5 cages in the world. A messenger ran into Raza's tent and reported, "Lord Kaze cage. 500 ninjas have left Konoha and appeared on the eastern border of the Land of Grass. IWA reciprocated and deployed 500 ninjas on the western border of the Land of Grass. And Iwa's ninjas still haven't entered the Land of Birds or Bear." A frown formed on Raza's face. He thought, what the hell is happening? I first thought that this was done by Konoha. But when IWA moved, I felt that I could have been wrong. But Iwa didn't invade us and instead, Konoha assisted us. How do I make sense of this situation? He thought for a bit but couldn't come to any conclusion. Finally, he instructed, have Goza deploy more spies in the land of grass. If Konoha and Iwa have allied, then this might be a trick to fool us. Is there any news from Seijo? The messenger shook his head and answered, no. He hasn't even seen the shadow of the culprit. It's as if he has disappeared from the desert. Raza snorted and instructed, where will he disappear? Ask him to keep searching. The messenger replied, yes Lord Kazekage, but there is another news. It's just that we haven't confirmed it yet. Some spies reported that Hatake Kakashi is leading a 1,200-strong ninja army and conducting military drills near their border with the land of hot water. So some council members think that he has already left. Raza frowned and furrowed his eyebrows. Once again, he received information that didn't make any sense. Shikaku couldn't guess that Suna would put the blame on Kakashi's head. If he did, he'd have kept Kakashi hidden to keep Suna occupied in the west. After thinking for a bit, Raza said, it is likely a trick by Konoha to make us drop our guard. Since it isn't confirmed, Konoha probably made someone use transformation jutsu. Let Seijo keep doing his work. The messenger nodded and left. For the next 3 weeks, Suna kept scouring the desert and for obvious reasons, they didn't find Kakashi there. However, in these 3 weeks, they stabilized the situation in the west. Though there was still resentment against them, law and order was maintained and common people were assured of their safety. However, the political situation still got worse as Toshio's family reached Wind Capital and complained about the events in Shunkyuto. Around the same time, Iwa and Kumo received some details about the events in the western regions of the Land of Wind. Oniki relaxed as it meant that no war would happen, while I was upset for the same reason. Regardless, the tensions died down as everyone realized that no war would happen. However, both countries raised their guard against Konoha as they were the only suspects. Neither Iwa nor Kumo wanted to deal with such a headache. So they provided additional security to their nobles and increased the number of patrol units. At the same time, Suna began plotting their revenge and started what would be a long game of shogi with Shikaku. In these 3 weeks, Fujin practiced Fuinjutsu for more than 12 hours every day with 60 shadow clones while he spent a similar amount of time meditating in the elemental training rooms. Finally, he received a message asking to visit Hiruzen's office. Fujin thought, it's almost a month since I came back. Did they find suitable subordinates for me? But, why did the messenger ask me to appear in the normal mission outfit instead of Umbu uniform? Fujin stopped his morning workout and went to Hiruzen's office. On entering, he saw a bunch of civilian officials along with Shikaku, Choza, and Homura in the room. Hiruzen saw Fujin and said, Fujin, you'll be accompanying me on a mission to the land of tea. Wait outside for a while. Fujin furrowed his eyebrows as he wondered, accompanying him on a mission? Is this supposed to be a rank S mission? He nodded and waited outside the room. Shikaku looked at Fujin and wondered, why did Lord Hokage ask Fujin to follow him on this mission? He looked at Hiruzen as a thought appeared in his head, does he intend to groom him like Kakashi for the Hokage position? I can see why considering his performance on the previous mission. But, he's still too young. Homura also looked at Fujin and thought, so this is the kid that Hiruzen refused to give to Danzo. I wonder what's special about him. Hiruzen hadn't mentioned Fujin's achievements in the Land of Wind to anyone. So no one apart from him and Shikaku knew. Though Danzo, Homura, and Koharu had questions and doubts after the recent event, Hiruzen feigned ignorance and pushed the blame on Iwa. Inside the room, discussions continued for another half an hour. Finally, the civilian officials left. A few minutes later, Hiruzen left as well. He was followed by Choza, Homura, and his guards. Hiruzen looked at Fujin and said, "Come with me." Fujin followed him. The group of 8 left the village and began traveling to the south. Hiruzen informed Fujin, "We are going to the land of tea to discuss some trade-related matters as well as some cooperation. You don't have to do anything, just pay proper attention in the meeting." Fujin was confused. He tilted his head and asked, "What will I observe in a trade-related meeting?" Fujin's first thought was that Hiruzen knew that someone would ambush him. But he immediately dismissed that idea. Despite his age, Hiruzen was one of the strongest ninjas in the world. Why would he need Fujin's protection? He wondered, is he planning on burning some city and needs an assist from my wind jutsu? Hiruzen replied, "Just pay proper attention. I'll tell you later." Fujin said, "All right." The group traveled through the vast forests rapidly. Fujin was a bit surprised that Homura was able to keep up with ease. He looked at him from the corner of his eye and thought, looks like despite his age, he has retained a good part of his strength. I wonder why he and Koharu never fought in the original story. Be it Orochimaru's attack, Pain's attack, or the Fourth Great Ninja War, they didn't participate in any fight despite being available. I don't recall properly, but I think they didn't fight even when Kurama rampaged inside Konoha. At the same time, Hamaru also sized up Fujin. He observed, "Not bad. Despite traveling with Hiruzen, he hasn't put his guard down and is prepared for any ambush. His chakra isn't bad either. It's at the Jounin level at such a young age. However, I can sense that he is hiding a portion of his chakra. So I can't be sure yet. Still, it shouldn't be much higher. But, why does Hiruzen want to make him a negotiator?" Chapter 288, Negotiations. The journey to the land of tea took a couple of days. Hiruzen made a lot of small talk on the way to inspire Fujin and his guards. Fujin took the opportunity to interact with Choza as he thought, Akimichi clan's body size manipulation is part of Yang release. Though it's unrealistic to get the methods of learning the jutsu from him in just this journey, there is no harm in creating a good relationship with him. After all, he is the only one from the Inoshikacho trio to live after the Fourth Great Ninja War. And if in the future my reputation becomes as good as Hiruzen's, I could try to ask him for it. The next afternoon, the group from Konoha arrived at Digarashi port in the land of tea without any incident along the way. However, Fujin was surprised when they arrived outside the gates of the village. Every major noble in the city was standing at the entrance of the gate. In fact, even the daimyo of the country was present. Fujin had made multiple trips to this country as an ninja in the last couple of years. So he easily identified most of the nobles and ministers waiting at the gates. Fujin peeked inside to see the sides of roads packed with spectators. Fujin thought, I didn't think I'd underestimate how much influence this old fox still has. The daimyo of the land of tea stepped forward and cordially greeted, Lord Hokage, it's good to see that you are still hale and hearty. Hiruzen smiled and replied, it's great to see that you are doing well too, Lord Daimyo. While the two exchanged pleasantries, two people walked to the sides of Daimyo. Hiruzen looked at one of them and said with a smile, Jirakai, are you doing well? Wasabi Jirakai bowed slightly and answered with a smile, I have been well, Lord Hokage. All thanks due to how efficiently Konoha carries out the missions. As he spoke, the face of the other man fell. However, he quickly hid it behind a fake smile and greeted Hiruzen politely. Hiruzen looked at him and thought, so he is the one who wants to take over Degarashi port from the Wasabi family. Hiruzen just nodded and began talking with the daimyo. Wagarashi Kuroku controlled his anger and didn't say anything disrespectful. One of the missions that Jirakai referred to, cost him more than 90% of his forces and over 50% of his wealth. After that, he lost his ability to create trouble for the Wasabi family. He had still not recovered from the blow that 5 squads sent by Hiruzen had dealt the Wagarashi family when they dared to enter the Land of Fire to eliminate Wasabi Daichi. Having learned his lesson, he had no intention of openly opposing Hiruzen. If it wasn't for ensuring his own benefits, he wouldn't even have shown up there. As they talked, the Daimyo and Hiruzen walked into the village. Jirakai, Kuroku, the nobles, ministers, and the Konoha ninjas followed them. As they walked, Fujin noticed a lot of curious gazes from the people that crowded both sides of the road. Some cheered, but most just watched casually. He wondered, are they really so curious to see a cage, or did the daimyo arrange them here to create a favorable image of the citizens on Hiruzen? We are here for trade discussions after all. The 4 Umbu ninjas had all their attention on the crowd in case any assassin was hidden. Homura, Choza, and Fujin weren't much concerned about this and just casually walked. The crowds thinned as they reached closer to the daimyo's palace. After entering, they were led into the grand hall inside the palace. The hall had several old and expensive artifacts. It had a large circular table at the center which was adorned with elegant tapestries and exquisite tea sets. Hiruzen took his seat while the daimyo sat opposite him. Jirakai and Kuroku sat next to the daimyo. The ministers of the daimyo and other nobles occupied seats next to them. Meanwhile, Homura sat to Hiruzen's right while Choza sat to his left. The Umbu stood behind Hiruzen while Fujin stood awkwardly thinking, should I take a seat or stand along with the Umbu? Homura was one of 3 village elders while Choza was a clan leader. Meanwhile, Fujin was just an orphan who was in the Umbu. Though he had gained a lot of strength, most of it was known to very few people. In addition, Hiruzen hadn't given him any purpose on this mission. Hiruzen looked at Fujin and said, take a seat as well, Fujin. Fujin nodded and sat next to Choza while thinking, in the last mission, Shikaku didn't give me any specific instructions. Though I wasn't interested in knowing the aftermath, I'm sure the last month would have been hell for him. I'm surprised that Hiruzen still didn't give me any instructions. At the same time, the eyes of the daimyo and the nobles fell on Fujin. They were surprised that Hiruzen asked someone so young to sit alongside the 3 of them. The daimyo looked at Fujin and thought, to bring someone so young here. Is Hiruzen planning something? Regardless, this young man must be someone worthy of keeping an eye on. Hiruzen looked at his Umbu guards who nodded in response and disappeared. The faces of the few ninjas in the daimyo's camp got serious. Only a few of them managed to see how the Umbu guards hid themselves. Soon, a bunch of servants appeared and served delicious warm food with great fragrance on the table. The daimyo said with a smile, I know you are very busy, Lord Hokage. So I decided to arrange for lunch while we discuss a trade deal. Hiruzen smiled and replied, that is very thoughtful of you, Lord Daimyo. The servants served all the food and left. Soon, the doors to the grand hall were closed. The daimyo asked, so, shall we start the discussion, Lord Hokage? Hiruzen nodded and said, yes. We received multiple requests from you. So you can begin, Lord Daimyo. The daimyo said, all right, Lord Hokage. As you know, there is a civil war happening in the Land of Water. Due to this, many ninjas are fleeing away. Unfortunately, instead of living peacefully, most have resorted to banditry. Though our major cities are safe, they cause great harm to small villages. When we send missions to Konoha to eliminate them, it generally takes around a week for any squads to come here. And in the last month, the delay has been even longer. This causes unnecessary loss of life and property. So my request is for you to establish a small military outpost in the land of Tea. At least until the chaos caused by the civil war in the land of water is settled. Until last month, the Tea daimyo was fine with the 1-week delay. However, due to the sudden buildup of tension between the 4 major villages, the villages reduced the number of missions they accepted drastically. Shikaku had deployed 1,700 ninjas within a few days to deter other countries and was showing that the other troops were being prepared as well. So Konoha was quite short on manpower as well. A frown formed on Homura's face as he said, "Lord Daimyo, that won't be possible. After all, if anyone has any enmity with Konoha, they might attack these ninjas instead of trying to attack in the land of fire. So it will be very dangerous for our ninjas." Hiruzen and Choza maintained their silence while Fujin just watched carefully. He was interested in seeing how they would negotiate. The daimyo said, "We can host them in big cities that are well protected. So they won't be in any danger normally. The only time their lives will be at risk is during the missions. But that would be true in any case." Homura shook his head and said, "That isn't the same. We study every mission properly and then assign squads with the necessary strength to complete the mission safely. If we don't, then the number of deaths will be very high." Homura's words caused the daimyo to fall silent. After all, he was putting the Konoha ninjas at risk. He couldn't force this matter. Jirakai said, "Lord Hokage, there is something that you can do. What if we consider every mission as rank A?" Kuroko snorted and asked, "Do you know how expensive that would be?" Jirakai immediately replied, "How can money be compared to the lives of our citizens? If needed, I can contribute my family's wealth for this purpose as well." Kuroko was surprised. At the same time, he was elated. He thought, "This is great. If he wastes all his money here, then I can catch up with his family in strength within 2 to 3 years." He immediately became quiet and let Jirakai commit a blunder. Since the opposite party was willing to pay, Homura became silent and looked at Hiruzen. The entire room paid attention to what his decision would be. Chapter 289, Lord Hokage is magnanimous. Hiruzen stayed silent for a minute. The silence made the nobles from the land of Tea nervous. Fujin noticed it and thought, "I remember that in my previous world, some politicians used to have long silences in their speeches. Looks like it is quite an effective tool here as well." Finally, Hiruzen said, "It isn't a matter of money. However, I can't ignore the suffering of the people here. I'll deploy an elite jounin along with 4 dozen ninjas at the border between the land of fire and the land of tea on the coast. You can issue your missions to them. That will reduce the journey time from a week to 1 or 2 days, which wouldn't be much longer than deploying ninjas in this or any other city. However, you will have to pay an appropriate cost for this." Jirakai asked, "What is the cost, Lord Hokage?" Kuroko snickered in his mind as he thought, "Great. Take all the fool's money away." Hiruzen maintained another few seconds of silence and said, "I'll need 400 fire crystals and 400 wind crystals every year that we deploy the ninjas here." Hiruzen's request surprised all the people from the land of tea. Choza and Homura already knew that Hiruzen would ask this. It was the main reason why they accompanied him. However, Fujin was surprised. He quickly looked at Hiruzen as his left eye twitched and thought, "Don't tell me. He brought me all the way here to tell me that he knows I'm using the wind crystals and he wants me to decrease the rate of using them because Konoha is running out of them." Hiruzen noticed Fujin's gaze but didn't look back at him. He thought, though this isn't the main purpose of bringing him here, it is a nice bonus. He should be smart enough to notice the hidden message. It'd be great for the village if he doesn't consume them at such a ferocious speed. Fujin's initial consumption speed was already giving Hiruzen headaches. However, in the last month, Fujin focused a lot on meditating there. Due to this, his rate of consumption increased several times. In the last month alone, he had consumed the energy in around 80 wind crystals by himself. Fujin immediately removed that thought from his head and analyzed, "No, how can the great Grand Hokage ask a young and promising ninja to reduce using wind crystals? I feel ashamed of thinking so little of the leader of my village. I'm sure that he brought me here to tell me that no matter how many wind crystals I use, he has my back. Even if Konoha runs out of wind crystals, he will visit smaller neighboring countries and ask them for wind crystals. This way, I can keep absorbing their energy without worrying that the village might run out of them. Sigh, he is such a great guy. Going up to such lengths to reassure the younger generation. I'll work hard and absorb energy from more and more crystals to repay his faith in me. It's a shame that shadow clones can't absorb this energy. Otherwise, I'd have repaid all faith." Fujin looked at Hiruzen again with a smile on his face as he concluded, "It doesn't matter what anyone says. The third Hokage is the most magnanimous person in the world." Hiruzen would have noticed Fujin's smile normally and sensed that something was wrong. However, his attention was gained by Kuroku, who spoke loudly, "How can we do that, Lord Hokage? Those crystals are meant for training our own ninjas. If we give them away, the strength of our ninjas would drop." Kuroku was enraged. He didn't mind Jirakai wasting his wealth. But the elemental crystals were important to him. He was buying as many as he could by bribing the ministers. Homura retorted, "No amount of elemental crystals can help you train an elite Jounin. The cost is far lesser than what the Kiri rogues will inflict upon you." Homura's words caused silence to spread among the nobles. However, Kuroku was unresigned. He said, "That isn't the same. There is no way we see a." He was interrupted by the Daimyo, "Kuroku, stay quiet." Kuroku immediately went quiet. Though he was influential, his influence was nothing when compared to the Daimyo's power. The Daimyo looked at Hiruzen and requested, "Please understand our difficulties." Hiruzen replied, "I understand your difficulties, Lord Daimyo. However, Homura's words are right. Still, I don't want to reduce the strength of your ninjas. So in order to compensate for the loss, I'll allow some of your ninjas to visit the base Konoha will establish at our border and receive training from our experienced ninjas. This would be far more beneficial for your ninjas." Hiruzen's proposal excited all the officials. If they could have ninjas from their families or factions train under capable ninjas from Konoha, their standings and influence would improve substantially in the land of Tea. Many nobles immediately said that it would be a good thing for the country. Kuroku frowned as he thought, if Konoha gives preference to training ninjas from the Wasabi family, then we will be at a disadvantage. But, everyone should have the same worry. I'll use it to suppress him later. Kuroku decided against opposing the idea as most of the nobles were in favor of it. The daimyo had the same worry. Though he had good relations with Konoha, it could be dangerous to his position if the Wasabi family's influence rose without any restraints. He asked, "How will you decide which ninjas to train?" Hiruzen replied, you can choose which ninjas to send. The number of ninjas and the duration of training will be decided by the elite jounin we send to the new post. The Tea Daimyo was relieved. He nodded and said, "All right, but I still have one issue. I can pay you 400 fire and wind crystals each for the first year as we have some stock. But, I can't sustain it for every year after that. I can only pay 100 fire and wind crystals each." Hiruzen already knew that they wouldn't be able to do that. He said, "That's too low. But understanding your difficulties, how about you pay me 200 fire and wind crystals each from the second year?" The Tea Daimyo thought for a bit and said, "That's reasonable. Let's do this deal, Lord Hokage." The Tea Daimyo's limit was 230 crystals. He willingly agreed. Choza said, "In addition, we would also like to discuss additional imports of herbs from your country and some discounts on the tea you sell." Jirakai smiled and said, "All right, but our population needs additional meat and some other food items." They immediately began negotiating for discounts on both sides. Fujin watched with interest as both sides negotiated for benefits non-stop shamelessly. The officials from the Land of Tea were unwilling to offer discounts on tea until Homura pointed out that they have eliminated almost all bandit groups from the Land of Fire and that the new post could slowly bring the same change in the Land of Tea. So their business won't be as risky anymore. Fujin was especially impressed by Homura's expertise at negotiating without any shame. He thought, looks like all of Hiruzen's friends are as shameless as him. No wonder they never fight. Why bother fighting and risking your life when the younger generation is willing to do that enthusiastically? I wonder if this is why Jiraiya doesn't want to be the Hokage. Still, negotiating seems fun. Never thought I'd enjoy seeing it. It's kinda the way I kept bugging Hiruzen and Renjiro for stronger jutsus. I wonder if Hiruzen brought me along to show that my shamelessness is still not enough and for me to take inspiration from Homura and these nobles and ministers. That said, I wonder if the legendary Talk no Jutsu would work during negotiation between shameless politicians. After a long discussion, the Land of Tea agreed to export multiple rare herbs to Konoha. They even agreed to a 5% discount on it as Konoha would buy them in bulk. In addition, they agreed to an 18% discount on their tea exports. As for Konoha, they agreed to a 7% discount on the meat and food items exported to the Land of Tea and agreed to increase it to 12% after the bandit groups in the Land of Tea were eliminated. After some more discussion about smaller matters, the meeting finally ended. Hiruzen and Homura exchanged glances. Both were satisfied with the outcome. As usual, Homura acted as an aggressive negotiator while Hiruzen acted as a peaceful and empathic negotiator. The officials from the Land of Tea were also satisfied with the results. The meeting concluded with a toast, a symbol of unity and cooperation between the Land of Tea and Konoha. After exchanging pleasantries and bidding farewells, the Konoha group left as quickly as they came. However, the discussions in the Grand Hall weren't over. Instead, they were just about to get very intense. And unlike the discussions so far, it would be extremely unfair to one person. Chapter 290, Guiding the Younger Generation. As soon as the Konoha ninjas left, the nobles and the ministers exchanged glances. Without exchanging any words, a scheme was formed in mere seconds. Kuroko said, "Lord Daimyo, we need to decide on the distribution of the ninjas that will be sent for training. And we also need to decide who will bear the cost of the elemental crystals we have to give. Since Jirakai agreed to pay Konoha out of his own pockets, I say we should let him bear the majority of the cost." Kuroko was immediately supported by the ministers that were bribed by him and other nobles. After all, if Jirakai paid, it meant that they would have to pay less. Jirikai was immediately put under pressure. He was disgusted by their actions. However, he stood by his morals and said, "Lord Daimyo, I'm willing to contribute to the safety of our citizens." The Daimyo nodded. He was worried about Jirikai using Konoha to increase his own influence. He said, "It won't be fair for you to pay the majority cost. However, since you were the one to put forth the proposal and offered to pay, I won't reject it. But making you pay the majority share won't be fair. I'll contribute 25% of the funds needed for this and you do the same. The other nobles will contribute the remaining 50% equally. As for the ninjas, we will wait for Konoha to send the details. I will allow everyone to send an equal number of ninjas. But since the Wasabi family is paying more, they will get the first choice. Does anyone have an objection to it?" Kuroku was surprised. He wasn't expecting Jirikai to go along with what he said. And he didn't expect the daimyo to agree to his words. Though Jirikai only had to pay 25%, it would still be many times more than what he would pay. In addition, Jirikai only received the first preference. This implied that he would at most get to send one more ninja than the rest of the nobles. So he received nothing despite paying more. He was elated as he realized, this is a great opportunity. Since I helped the other nobles save a lot of money, they will owe me a favor. I'll use these favors to secure control of Digarashi port in the future. But, I'll have to be careful of Jirikai. He could sway public opinion in his favor by spreading the fact that he contributed the most to public safety. As soon as I leave, I'll begin spreading rumors that Jirikai offered Konoha the money of this country and paid them several times what we got in return. Though not true, I'm sure every other noble will cooperate with me. Though the daimyo can clear his name, Jirikai would gain no benefit from spending so much money here. Kuroku and the rest immediately agreed. The group discussed a bit more and left. As they left, the daimyo looked at Kuroku's back and thought, this guy is good. Having bribed so many of my ministers, he could corner Jirikai despite having much lesser influence overall. The daimyo shook his head and concluded, unfortunately, he is too short-sighted. The Wasabi family is backed by Konoha. They won't allow Digarashi port to switch hands. If he truly threatens the Wasabi family's position, Konoha will eliminate him or make me take action. Oh well, until that time, I can make good use of him. While the officials of the Land of Tea were discussing, the Konoha's group was traveling rapidly across the country. Their next target was the Land of Noodles. Hiruzen looked at Fujin and asked, Fujin, what did you observe during the negotiations? Fujin almost replied involuntarily, that everyone sitting in a position of power is extremely shameless. Fortunately, he controlled himself and answered. We have to work very hard to secure benefits for our citizens. Hiruzen nodded and said, yes. But that's not what I am talking about. Analyze our actions and words during the meeting. Tell me why we did what we did and their consequences. Fujin fell into thought while Homura and Choza looked at him. Both were surprised at how openly Hiruzen intended to groom Fujin. After thinking for a while, Fujin answered, Konoha is a lot stronger than the Land of Tea and we are the only country that has a land border with them. So we were in a position of power in this meeting. However, since our relations are very good, we couldn't be very forceful. Fujin turned his eyes towards Homura and said, I guess Elder Homura came along to act as the bad cop while you played the good cop to get what Konoha wants. Though I'm pretty sure that they could see through this act, just that they didn't dare to say it out loud. Homura's eyes widened as he looked at Fujin in surprise. He was impressed with Fujin's analysis but felt that it was nothing extraordinary until he heard the last sentence. He thought, he could see through their acting. Fujin continued, you used the opportunity provided by the unstable conditions due to the civil war and probably something that happened in the last month due to which we weren't able to accept the missions in time to get the elemental crystals. Since the daimyo agreed so easily, you should have calculated how much stock he had. As for the yearly payments, what you expected should have been under 200 each. I guess that the situation in the country is quite bad due to which the daimyo didn't negotiate a lot. As for the tea and herbs discount, I guess you want to take advantage of safer traveling conditions to save some money. Hiruzen nodded and replied, good analysis. Especially the deterrence part. It's the advantage that we get due to being strong. Other countries will act carefully in order to not provoke us. As for the elemental crystals, my lower limit was 150 of each. If I didn't offer the daimyo to train their ninjas, he would have probably bargained down to this number. However, you aren't completely right about the tea and the herbs negotiations. Those safer traveling conditions allowed us the ability to propose that, the main reason for doing it was to mask the elemental crystal deal that we did. That is why Choza accompanied me on this journey. Fujin thought for a bit and asked, the other major villages might take action if we openly gain the elemental crystals. Hiruzen nodded and answered, yes. While elemental crystals aren't very useful for someone at my level, it is quite useful for young ninjas at the Chunin level. Though they won't start a war over this, they would do something similar and get the elemental crystals assigned to their neighboring villages forcefully. In addition, it would also expose that we are spending a lot on our military. So other villages will also openly build their armies and we will progress towards the Fourth Great Ninja War. Fujin nodded and replied, that makes sense. He thought, in the last month I noticed that the effect of the wind crystals on me is reducing slowly. If I keep consuming them at this rate, their effect would be negligible after around half a year. Or rather, it'd be more appropriate to say that I'd need a lot more wind crystals in order to have some improvements. But, if my speed of absorbing the energy doesn't increase, then it'll take months of meditation to make small gains. Definitely not worth the time or cost it'd take. However, Fujin had one confusion. He looked at Hiruzen and wondered, why is he teaching me how negotiations happen? Hiruzen noticed Fujin's look and asked, are you wondering why I am explaining to you how negotiations happen? Fujin nodded. Hiruzen chuckled and said, I want you to be responsible for Konoha's negotiation in the future. Fujin was surprised. He asked, isn't it the Hokage's job to negotiate? Also, I have no experience in this. Hiruzen replied, not really. Any of the elders can negotiate in my absence. So can Shikaku as the Jounin commander. As for the experience, don't worry about it. I'll be taking you along to all the negotiation meetings from now on. We will be heading to the land of noodles next. Just like the land of tea, we have good relations with them as well. So the discussion will probably go similarly. However, since they are a newer and smaller country, the amount of elemental crystals with them will be lesser. Just observe once again and understand how the negotiations go better. A month later, we will go to negotiate with the land of river and the land of grass. Our relationship with them, though good, isn't as good as these two countries. So the negotiations will be tougher. During those negotiations, you are allowed to speak if you feel that it'll benefit the village. Homura was surprised once again. He looked at Hiruzen and thought, he has permission to speak after just 2 meetings. Sensei took us to several meetings for over 2 years before allowing us to speak. Why is Hiruzen being so impatient?